Right after our Rosh Hashanah services ended on Thursday this past week, as we were beginning to make our way from our sanctuary out to our courtyard, as I was taking off my talit and coming down from our bima, a person in our community approached me. We greeted each other warmly. Then this person said, "I have one correction to your sermon." "Okay, sure. What is it?" I responded with curiosity and eagerness. It turns out the correction was about one of the finer points of a very important Jewish saying. The person said, "It's not, 'They tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat.' Instead, it's, 'They tried to kill us, we won, let's eat.'" I'll admit, in the moment I was perplexed. I remembered in that specific line I had been quoting another person, a college student, as he shared his reflections about anti-Semitism on his campus. In my Rosh Hashanah teaching, I had shared several quotes by college students, and I remembered taking care to present their quotes accurately word for word. So in the moment, I responded to the person explaining I was quoting somebody else. I appreciated their feedback and their attention to the message I was trying to convey. And then I had to move along and make sure I could speak to others as I moved outside to the courtyard. But this brief exchange has stuck with me. It's been reverberating in my mind and my soul throughout these days of awe. I've continued to reflect on what it means for us to survive and what it means for us to win. Just a few weeks ago, I was teaching a session of an adult education class, our Israel history crash course. In the session, one of the participants asked, "Isn't it true that we, the Jewish people, are a people of peace? And isn't it true that our enemies glorify violence?" Now, strictly speaking, we can't generalize and say all Jews or all Muslims or all Arabs or all people in any demographic group share precisely the same views. But this participant who asked, "Isn't it true that Jews value peace and that our enemies glorify violence?" A very simple answer could be, yes. We are a people of peace. Our people glorifies peace. We say over and over again throughout all of our prayer services, weekdays, holidays, every day of the year, Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. May God who makes peace in God's heights, make peace upon us and upon all Israel. We say over and over again, every time we return our Torah scroll to the Ark, v'kol netivotei shalom. All the paths of Torah are paths of peace. And lest you think this value of peace is found only in prayer, many years ago, I was living in New York City. I was in a coffee shop with a friend and taking my first ever Hebrew lesson. Moments after opening the textbook, 2 Israeli men magically appeared by our table asking, "Ma nishma?" And so I asked them, "What is the most important Hebrew word?" In unison, without hesitation, they said, "Shalom." Peace. And unfortunately, our enemies glorify violence. I'm sure that many of us have seen the harrowing photo of a billboard in Tehran depicting the recent airstrikes on Tel Aviv. In the foreground of the photo are 2 young people walking down the street casually enjoying life. And in the background of the photo is the billboard. The billboard's image includes a caption, not just in Farsi, but also in Hebrew. And it reads, "Yesh limchok et Yisrael me'al pnei ha'adama v'zeh tchilat ha'sipur." We will wipe Israel off the face of the planet, and that's just the beginning. We are a people of peace, and our enemies glorify violence. Not only do our enemies glorify violence, they want us gone. We're a people of peace. And at the very same time, we are and we must be a people of victory. As it is said, they tried to kill us. We won. Let's eat. The single most celebrated story of victory in our Jewish tradition is the story of Purim. King Ahasuerus in his foolishness empowers the wicked Haman. When our man Mordecai refuses to bow down to Haman, because as a Jew, he'll bow only to God, Haman decides to wreak vengeance not just on Mordecai, but on Mordecai's people. Haman manipulates the king's authority, decreeing death upon all Jews. The heroic Queen Esther intervenes, coming out of hiding to reveal she is Jewish. King Ahasuerus immediately flips the script. Haman is impaled on the stake that he intended for Mordecai. Mordecai takes Haman's place of power. And meanwhile, the date is approaching that Haman had set before he was impaled on the stake for the massacre, for the genocide of the Jewish people. Quickly, Mordecai spreads the word that King Ahasuerus has given permission for the Jewish people to use deadly force to defend themselves. As we read in the book of Esther, chapter 8, verse 11, the king has permitted the Jews of every city to assemble and fight for their lives. If any people or province attacks them, they may destroy, massacre, and exterminate its armed force together with women and children and plunder their possessions. Now, we did assemble and fight for our lives, but we did not kill women and children, and we did not plunder our enemies' possessions. As we read in the book of Esther, chapter 9, the Jews struck at their enemies with the sword, slaying and destroying. They wreaked their will upon their enemies. In the fortress Shushan, the Jews killed a total of 500 men. They also killed the 10 sons of Haman, the foe of the Jews, but they did not lay hands on the spoil. The Jews mustered again the next day and slew 300 men in Shushan, but they did not lay hands on the spoil. They rested the next day and feasted, and these days are recalled and observed in every generation, by every family, every province, and every city. The book of Esther, chapter 9, concludes, "These days of Purim shall never cease among the Jews, and the memory of them shall never perish among their descendants." Our story of Purim teaches us that in order to be a people of peace, in order to survive and thrive as a people of peace, we must embrace victory. We must celebrate victory. And this is not the same thing as glorifying violence. It is meaningfully and distinctly different. In the story of Purim, we had the king's permission to massacre civilians and plunder possessions, and we did neither. We used deadly force, not because we wanted to, but because we needed to. And furthermore, we tell and retell the story of Purim every single year. We do this as a peace-loving people, a people who praise Oseh Shalom Bimromav, a people for whom shalom is the most important word. We do this because, in a world where our enemies glorify violence, in a world where our enemies want to wipe us off the face of the earth, victory is a necessary step along the path to peace. As we all know too well, earlier this week we marked October 7th. It was 1 year ago on the secular calendar that terrorists invaded the borders of our Holy Land, of our homeland, and brutally massacred 1,200 of our Israeli brothers and sisters. On the anniversary of this dark and horrible day, indeed, on every day since October 7th last year, we all have reason to cry out to God and ask, how did this happen? How could this happen? Why did this happen to us? There are political answers, there are military answers, but there are no satisfying answers. So we have a spiritual answer, an answer from our tradition. This terrible destruction, this evil, is the result of sinat chinam, senseless hatred. The rabbis of ancient times explained that sinat chinam, senseless hatred, was the cause of the destruction of the first and second holy temples in ancient Jerusalem and of our exile from our Holy Land. Looking back to our story of Purim, we see sinat chinam, senseless hatred, in the relationship between Haman and Mordecai. When Mordecai does not bow down to Haman, Haman begins to hate. And Haman does not just hate Mordecai, but Haman instantly hates all Jews. And looking today to the images in our media, looking to the billboard in Tehran proclaiming in Hebrew, we will wipe Israel off the face of the planet, and that's just the beginning, we see nothing other than sinah chinam, senseless hatred. So we have a spiritual response from our tradition, an action we can take in the face of senseless hatred. That action is ahavat hinam, senseless love. Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of pre-state Israel, teaches us in his Orot HaKodesh, if we are destroyed and the world with us due to senseless hatred, then we shall rebuild ourselves and the world with us with senseless love. Earlier this week, on the evening of October 7th, I attended the LA Remembers Memorial event. Taking the stage were actors and singers, rabbis and elected officials, community leaders, soldiers, and families whose loved ones are still held hostage. Senseless love, love of the Jewish people and love from one Jew to another, was without a doubt the mood and the theme of the evening. Yet one story spoke to me uniquely to illustrate what senseless love can look like, what senseless love must look like in a time of unspeakable darkness. This story was told by Yaniv Kestenbaum, a lead security officer at Kibbutz Or HaNer. Yaniv Kestenbaum is not a celebrity or a public person. I Googled him the next day, and all I could find about him on the English-speaking internet is that he's a certified CrossFit instructor. Yet to me, and to all of us, Yaniv is an exemplar of senseless love. At 6:29 a.m. on Shabbat morning, October 7th, 2023, Yaniv was at home with his wife and children. The sirens went off, as at times they did. Such is life on a kibbutz near Sderot, near Gaza. The family went into their safe room, and the children went back to sleep, the adults dozing off soon after. But soon it became clear that this was no ordinary siren. Yaniv's phone began sounding with messages that this was an emergency, that it was time for him to lead his kibbutz in mobilizing a defense of their community, a defense of their home. His wife pleaded with him to stay in the safe room. He responded to her that he had to go out, that it was his job to mobilize the security team and protect the community. That was an act of senseless love. For hours, Yaniv and his security team were in battle, fighting off terrorists at the kibbutz's front gate. In the midst of it all, a pickup truck approached. At first, Yaniv's team thought it was full of terrorists, but soon it became clear they were neighbors, Israelis from the kibbutz nearby. As the pickup truck drew near, Yaniv looked in the back and saw the lifeless body of one of his dear friends. His soul swelled with emotion. He took a deep breath, knowing that he had to stay focused, that now was not the time to react. That was an act of senseless love. For reasons we may never understand, we live in a world where our enemies want to wipe us off the face of the earth. We live in a world that contains senseless hatred. And so it is our task to rebuild our world with senseless love. When our soldiers, when our security officers risk their lives to protect their communities, that's senseless love. When mothers stay home to care for their children while fathers go into a battle that they did not start, that is senseless love. When, in the heat of battle, we hold our emotions back for a time, that we may protect others whose lives are at risk, that's senseless love. When we fight for our survival, when we are victorious, we are showing senseless love not only for our brothers and sisters, not only for our homeland, not only for each other, but also for our tradition, for our heritage, and for ourselves. God made us Jewish. God created us, and God created our people to be a light unto the nations, a light unto the world. When we fight for our survival and when we are victorious, we are showing senseless love for the essence of who we are as Jews. And we will rebuild ourselves and the world with us with senseless love. Earlier this week at the LA Remembers Memorial, I was honored to hear words from Roz Rothstein, CEO and co-founder of Stand With Us. She spoke about a recent experience she had meeting a Hindu spiritual leader, Rabbi Shankar, a teacher of meditation, of breathing practices that can teach people to be calm. And she asked him, "What can I say to the Jewish people right now in this time of war? How can we be calm?" And he answered her, "Tell your people that the universe has a way of turning itself around. The universe has a way of turning itself around." Now, isn't that the story of Purim? We were supposed to be the vanquished, and we became the victors. Haman was impaled on the very same stake that he had prepared for Mordecai. Each year on Purim, when we read the book of Esther, we conclude with a special blessing. It reads, "Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, praised are you, God, our God, King of the universe, Harav et Rivenu, who pleads our cause, V'hadan et dinenu, who judges our claim, V'hanokem et nikmatenu, who avenges our wrong, V'hamashalem gemul l'chol oivei nafshenu, who brings retribution to our enemies, V'hanifra lanu mitzarenu, and punishes our foes. Baruch atah Adonai, praised are you, God, Hanifra le'amo Yisrael mikol tzarehem, who on behalf of God's people Israel exacts punishment from all their foes, Ha'el HaMoshiach, the God who brings salvation." We learn from our story of Purim that things will turn around, that God will turn things around for us. We learn from our story of Purim that in the face of senseless hatred, in the face of certain destruction, we must respond with senseless love. We must respond by protecting our communities, our loved ones, and ourselves. And we learn from our story of Purim that we do not glorify violence. We learn from our story of Purim that we do not slay civilians and we do not lay hands on the spoil. We fight for our survival. And in the face of senseless hatred, victory is a necessary step on the path to peace. And as a people of peace, as a people of shalom, we know that it will only tear down the world if we engage in senseless hatred. We learn from our story of Purim that we show our senseless love when we fight for our survival and win. In the coming year, may our acts of senseless love rebuild our world. May God plead our cause. May God judge our claim. And may God bring salvation to us, to Israel, and to the Jewish people. Am Yisrael Chai, Gemar Chatima Tova.